So I'm going to give a short explanation of what is consumer behavior. I'm going to do that with an infographic just to explain some of the basic concepts on how we evaluate consumer behavior. Okay, so consumer behavior is how a consumer allocates the income that he receives between different products in an effort to maximize his utility or then his well-being. And what we use is an indifference curve. So the indifference curve gives us an indication of the value that the consumer attached to the use of products, and it gives us a value of utility. So in this case, we have two indifference curves. The first one, the darker one, has a utility value, which can be anything, but in this case it's 25. And that is with a combination of using clothes and food. But an indifference curve, a higher indifference curve, relates to a higher utility for the individual, and that includes using more of both goods. So the curve represents all combinations of goods and services that provides the consumer with the same level of satisfaction. It's important in this case to consider the shape of the curve. Why does it look like this? We also have assumptions about this whole model of preferences, which is built into this consumer theory model. And then the shape of the curve is an indication of what consumers actually value certain goods more than others. And in that case, there will be a difference in shape. So if a consumer prefers clothes more than food, the shape of the indifference curve will illustrate that. What we then have is the slope of the indifference curve. So the magnitude of the slope illustrates what we call the marginal rate of substitution. And that basically means it illustrates what quantity of one good the consumer is willing to let go in order to get one more unit of another. So in this case, we'll see how many units of clothes is the consumer willing to let go in order to get one more unit of food. And the MRS is calculated by the change in Y over the change in X. So now that we have the indifference curve, which is the preference of the consumer, we move further to the budget line. So the budget line tells us that a consumer operates given the income that he receives. So he can't spend more than he actually has the ability to spend on. So this curve or this line is the value of income that the consumer has, and what can he buy, the amount of clothes and food that he can buy given his income. And this budget line can also shift or move around. So there's two things that can result or that actually result in the change of the budget line. The first is if your budget change, either increasing or decreasing. So in this case, the budget is increasing to 160, and in that case, it's decreasing to 40 from the 80. So that's a shift of the budget line. So you can buy more of both goods. The second aspect that can change the budget line is if the price of goods change. So if clothes become more expensive or cheaper, the number of clothes that you can buy will change. Or if the food becomes more expensive or cheaper, then the number of units of food will change. So the slope of the budget line, which is a change in clothing divided by the change in food, represented here at the bottom, the slope, which is equal to that change, is also equal to the price ratio of the two goods. In this case, it's the price ratio of food over clothing. So now that we know that we have a consumer that has a preference given when we look at the indifference curve, and we have budget constraints as shown by the budget line, we combine these two, and now we get a graph where the consumer will have to make a choice in order to maximize his utility. And in this case, This is the combination of the two goods. So we look at bread and chocolate, and this is the budget line, there's the indifference curve, and where the slope of both of these two lines are equal, that is exactly the point where the consumer will maximize his utility. So the marginal rate of substitution is equal to the price ratio of the budget line, which is chocolate over bread. If these two values are equal, we know that the consumer maximized his utility, and if the MRS is not equal to the price ratio, in this case the consumer did not maximize his utility. And that, in short, is the consumer behavior and how consumers maximize their utility within consumer theory.